Hello and welcome, this is Pam. Today we're going to be talking about MS is a parasitic infestation. I'm going to share with you a ton of research, an overview of the research. You can go deeper into different topics if you want, but I have been collecting and researching this area because I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis over 35 years ago. So I'm going to share profound research showing specific types of parasites that are causing MS. I'm going to also share with you an overview of the step-by-step plan we use to recover from these parasites, and you're going to hear amazing inspirational stories from the wellness champions that have recovered, and some of them, they're getting on like 8-9 years by now and sharing with you the life that they're living now. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. And I am so honored to share this with you because this information helps us to know what causes MS and other chronic diseases. And so then we can cure it, we can recover from it. And that is so important because now it seems that with all of the MS research, we're really not talking about a cure anymore. We're talking about managing the disease, slowing it down. And if you have multiple sclerosis or another disease, I'm sure you're not happy with that. I definitely am not either. We want a cure. We want to get on with our life. We would like to help other people that are just newly diagnosed to be able to treat the cause early so they don't have to suffer like we did. So I'm going to take you on a little journey of how, or the different types of parasites that I have learned about over my 35 years of researching this. And I'm happy to share with you that by the grace of God and a lot of work on my part, I have been able to live MS free for over 35 years now. We've helped hundreds of people all over the world. I'm going to share some of their amazing stories. You can actually go later on, you can go listen to their videos and hear their experiences, and it's truly profound. So this is all about change. This is all about hope. This is all about changing the way that we treat chronic disease, getting down to the root cause, allowing us to get on with our life. So when I was first diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I was told by the experts that there was nothing I could do. I would be completely disabled, and I was devastated. I was a healthy young mom, had been healthy all my life, and then all of a sudden, I had this mysterious disease that basically took my vision out of my left eye, complete black patch on my eye. I started getting weakness and tingling in my legs. I went to see a neurologist at a university MS hospital clinic on the west coast of Canada, one of the very best clinics we have. And there he gave me the diagnosis, and I didn't even really know what MS was, but he said that I would be completely disabled in time, and there was nothing that I could do to change the course of my life. He also made a point to tell me that people are going to tell you about all kinds of snake oil cures, but as the expert, I'm telling you, there's nothing you can do. You can imagine how devastated I was walking out of his office. My husband drove me home through the mountain pass, and it was pouring rain, and I just cried all the way home. I just thought, I had 2 small children. How was I going to take care of them? What a burden I would be to my husband. Well, long story short, I have, by the grace of God again, I have been working really hard, researching like crazy. I have been able to live MS free for 35 years. We developed a program. I've developed a program called the Live Disease Free Plan. We've helped hundreds of people all over the world. I would say thousands by now. And many have recovered in different countries. And this is getting on to be probably about 9 years now. I'll have to sit down and do the math. We've got to have our 10-year celebration here right away. But some of them have started to do podcasts or wellness clinics or writing books. Well, health companies, right when you get your health back, you really want to help others, just like I have done myself. So when I was first diagnosed, the first parasitic infection that I learned about was Candida, which is a type of yeast, which is a type of fungus. So to me, and this is true, but any microbe that lives in your body and causes you harm is a parasite. It's a freeloader. It's stealing nutrients from you, it's producing poisons, it's getting your immune system has to fight it. So yes, fungus can be a parasite, can be considered a parasite also. The reason that I learned about this was that my mother-in-law gave me one book, and that book talked about how this doctor, William Crook, was helping people to reverse all kinds of chronic diseases, including multiple sclerosis, 40 years ago, like decades ago. And so multiple sclerosis was included in his book also. So she gave me the book. She said, I don't know if it's going to help you, Pam. But when I read that book, it really gave me hope. It opened my eyes to like, man, maybe there's something I can do here. I didn't know if I could cure myself or recover fully, but the doctors gave me no hope at all. And so this medical doctor, way ahead of his time, was just sharing his experience as he was helping his patients that had MS and other chronic diseases by treating Candida. And he wrote the book called The Yeast Connection. I would not recommend buying it. It's really outdated. You can probably find it in a library. I'm actually going to grab it. I'm going to share some of these old classic books that I have. So The Yeast Connection is by Dr. William Crook. And again, it was the first book that I read that started to give me hope. Then I read a book. So I should backtrack. This was a long time ago, before we had the wellness revolution, before we had a lot of health food stores. We had this tiny little health food store in our hometown, just a tiny little place. And it was kind of more like where hippies would hang out. It wasn't it wasn't like we have the health food stores today where you have all this produce and all these different supplements. It was just a small herbal place. But there was always a magazine that was published every month called The Alive magazine. And they would always do a book review at the back of that magazine. And so I'd always get that magazine. It was free. And then I would look on the back, and then I'd find another doctor talking about this. So then I found Dr. Orion Truss, The Missing Diagnosis, speaking very much similar language to Dr. William Crook, talking about how Candida and other infections were causing chronic disease, and treating them, his patients were recovering. Then I found another doctor, and this is Dr. Luc de Shepherd, and he wrote the book Candida. So you can see a theme, like a lot of these doctors 40 years ago really felt that Candida was the culprit, was the main cause of multiple sclerosis and other chronic diseases. Then I found another book. We can't forget about Dr. Zoltan Rona, who is a Canadian doctor. And this Canadian doctor wrote this book called The Complete Candida Yeast Guidebook. This was also really helpful. It had different ideas. So back then, the diet was very different than it is now as we want to recover from parasites, but it was a really great start. So these are all medically trained doctors that understood 40 years ago, 4 decades ago, that chronic diseases were caused by infections, and their most common one that they felt was Candida, but I'm sure they felt other parasites too, but they used more herbs. And then a dear friend of mine, Doug Kaufman, you may have watched his Know the Cause program. He's the fungus guy. He wrote this book, or I should say a series of books, showing the fungus link to different types of conditions. So we know that fungus is an opportunist, and it really loves to recycle garbage. So we'll talk more about it later, but basically the science shows that when we have multiple sclerosis, we have a higher incidence of Candida infections. We have higher incidence of Candida in our blood and also in our central nervous system. And they've even found Candida in brain cells. So that is definitely one of the infections that we want to consider, because fungi can produce mycotoxins, which are some of the most toxic substances in the world. And so we definitely want to treat them if we're dealing with fungal overgrowth. That was the first type of infection that I learned about, was the Candida link. And we didn't even know much about mold. Now, a lot of the integrative doctors do understand that mold is also an issue, and that's another type of fungus. Then, maybe 15 years ago at least, I started to learn about the vector-borne infections associated with Lyme disease. And this is really, really huge. So there's a number of parasites that travel together, and they travel through biting insects. So it's not just the ticks, but it can also be mosquitoes, it can be different flies that bite, it can be spiders. So they can be transmitted through the bite of insects. One that's really been linked significantly to multiple sclerosis, like this is really huge. So we talked about fungus and how big that was. And then now we're talking about a bacteria. So Lyme disease, the actual bacteria that causes Lyme disease is Borrelia, and Borrelia is a corkscrew-shaped bacteria. The link between MS and these spirochetes dates back to like over 100 years ago. Studies done between 1911 and 1939. There's at least 50 studies done in really well-respected scientific journals. This was before World War II. And they found, so this is like France, Germany, and England, they discovered these spirochetes, which are the corkscrew-shaped bacteria. They were found in the brain lesions of people who died of MS. And they isolated these bacteria and they injected them into animals like mice, rabbits, even primates. And they found that those animals they were able to isolate the spirochetes from those animals, and they had the infection was transferred to the animals. So these are really profound findings, and yet all this research was dropped. So these researchers, like early 1900s, they knew that there was this spirochete bacteria, and the reason they felt that it was so significant is because the Borrelia spirochete is very similar to the spirochete that causes syphilis. And they understood that syphilis is a bacterial infection. It's a spirochete also. When it gets into the central nervous system, it causes so many neurological symptoms like multiple sclerosis would have. And so they were like, well, it's like the same type of spirochete, and we know what it does what syphilis does in the brains of people. So this is really significant. But all that research got dropped. All of it just disappeared. Nobody talks about it. That's on our website, livediseasefree.com. Under research, you can find links to some of these studies. They're really old. I talk about them in my masterclass training. But you might wonder, like, why aren't we researching all of this today? Why aren't we looking for infections? Because our healthcare system has changed dramatically. Like our doctors, I don't even think they're allowed to have microscopes in their office. Everything is outsourced to labs, and labs is like they're looking for certain things. So for example, with multiple sclerosis, they're not looking for parasites in your spinal fluid. They're only looking for antibody bands with specific tests. They're only looking, when you do an MRI, they're looking for lesions. They don't care what's in the lesion. They just like, oh, you have lesions in these specific places that come and go. Oh, you have multiple sclerosis. But what are those lesions? So we no longer do autopsies, or we properly stain brain tissue to find these infections. Not true for Dr. Alan McDonald, who is a pathologist in the United States. And he did some amazing work, which we are going to get into right next here. So because we don't know that they're not even looking for parasites in the central nervous system. This is the problem. And so this is where, when you become aware of how the system is rigged, how it is stuck in this paradigm, we'll never find a cure if we don't start to demand things to go differently. But back in the day, like with Borrelia, very often it's an intracellular parasite, so it goes inside your cells, and there's cyst forms too. So if they don't stain it properly to look under a microscope, they're not going to see it. And then obviously our doctors don't have that skill. They're really busy. They're kept busy with just seeing patient after patient after patient really quickly. And they don't know how to do all this proper staining to find these parasites. So the infections are there. They're just not visible because we're not looking for them, and we're not, the people that do know how to stain, they're not having access to this, except for like Dr. Alan McDonald, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So again, the spirochete link with multiple sclerosis, this Lyme spirochete Borrelia link is really, really significant. Is it always Borrelia? I don't know. It has never been proven, but there are so many other things that cause us to understand that Borrelia is probably a really big part of multiple sclerosis. So the spirochete, the Borrelia spirochete and the syphilis spirochete, they are part of the same family of bacteria. They cause many of the same neurological symptoms that we would see in the central nervous system, identical to multiple sclerosis. Dr. Alan McDonald stated, since spirochetes are the cause of neurodegenerative diseases in syphilis, could it be that spirochete or Lyme spirochetes are wholly or partially responsible for the neurological degenerative diseases like ALS, MS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's that we face in our country? So he did provide evidence, Dr. Alan McDonald, and I've shared this on my masterclass training, where he showed that Borrelia was inside worms, like small roundworms that he found in every MS subject tested. We're going to talk about those worms in a minute, but they were loaded with Borrelia. And then he also found Borrelia in the spinal fluid of MS patients. He also found Borrelia present in the myelin sheath of nerve cells in Alzheimer's patients. So if they can infect the myelin of nerve cells in Alzheimer's patients, and we know that they are present in MS, central nervous system, they could definitely infect the myelin inside the myelin of MS patients also. So he is absolutely amazing. He should have won so many awards for the work that he's done. If you ever find his work, I don't know if he's still studying, but he had some GoFundMe or some fundraising, just make sure to support it, because he has done this work on a shoestring budget. He didn't need millions and millions of dollars. He simply got permission to get the remains of MS patients that had MS, died, and their remains were preserved in brain banks. And so he was able to use that, and he just looked and he found he was the only one that's done this. And since then, nobody has tried to disprove him. Nobody has looked. And he found those little roundworms in 10 out of 10 MS subjects that he analyzed. And they were loaded with Borrelia that causes Lyme disease. Dr. Klinghardt is one of my hero doctors that I've studied a lot under. I have so much respect for him. And he is a Lyme expert also, and he has reported that at least 90% of his MS patients test positive for the Lyme spirochete, Borrelia. Then we have the National MS Society, their website. They took this down, but I did take a copy. But basically, they were stating that Lyme disease, I shared this on my masterclass training. You can see this screenshot that I got from their website. That is not there anymore. Maybe it was too confusing. But they stated that Lyme disease patients and MS patients can have many of the same symptoms, and they both have MRI and lumbar puncture abnormalities that are very similar. And they can both have antibodies against Borrelia and Lyme spirochetes. But they said the only difference is that when you have Lyme disease, you respond to antibiotics, but when you have MS, you do not respond to antibiotics. And that last statement is so inaccurate, because if you've had chronic Lyme for years, you don't respond well to antibiotics. If you've had, and then also I've shared on my masterclass training, they have a few studies that they have funded that show that antibiotics do help MS patients. So in this one, I don't know which country it was in, but the National MS Society, they stated that antibiotics don't help MS, but for Lyme disease, antibiotics help. But then I found studies that were financially funded by this same organization that they found that antibiotics did help multiple sclerosis patients, but only in the early stages. And that would be accurate for Lyme disease also, because in time, Borrelia does not stay in the blood. It moves into our tissues, right? And it's intracellular, it moves in deep into our tissues. So an antibiotic that just goes through our blood is not going to treat it for Lyme or for multiple sclerosis. So we have the MS Society giving us all of this evidence also. So again, this is a forgotten science that started over 100 years ago. It is so brutal. Like, I'm just sharing and sharing and sharing, and I'm hoping you guys will help me to get the word out. I'm hoping you guys will share this with different groups. People don't know, they've never heard of it. Even the neurologists don't know about this. They've been sheltered from this. And I do know that some of them are not going to be open, but there are a lot of practitioners that are starting to become curious about parasites. And when you can show them all of this science behind it, that helps them to go, oh, wow, there's a lot here. Let's talk about Dr. Alan McDonald. He is absolutely amazing. I just love that man, and Dr. Klinghardt. Like, there's some people that are just, I call them saints on this planet Earth right now. So Dr. Alan McDonald, I already mentioned, he found these nematodes, they're called filarial worms, in the central nervous system of every MS subject he tested, 10 out of 10. And what's so relevant about that is that for over 100 years, veterinarians have known that when these little roundworms get in the central nervous system of domestic animals, that would be cows, horses, dogs, cats, sheep, they have symptoms identical to multiple sclerosis and other neurological diseases. So in the veterinarian world, they know that these worms cause all these neurological symptoms like balance issues and paralysis and spasticity and cognitive impairment and like everything. It's like identical. I think that it just depends where the parasites are located in our central nervous system as to what symptoms they're causing and how many are present. So he found them mating, he found them in clusters, he found all of their waste material, the awful guck they leave behind, and he found that they were loaded with Borrelia inside. They could have had other parasites too, but he only looked for Borrelia because he is a Borrelia expert. So that is incredibly significant, and nobody has tried to disprove his findings. Nobody. Why? Because there is no money in it. This is the frustrating thing, is that they will only fund when they are looking for a new patentable disease-modifying drug that they can charge a lot of money for, maybe $100,000 a year. Treating parasites is not good business. So he not only found nematodes, but he found developing tapeworm larvae. So that's the immature form. And a lot of times these little larvae, they are in sacs in our brain, and that is called neurocysticercosis. I've done a blog post on that, an article on our website, Live Disease Free. So I'm just doing an overview of all of this. You can find, if you just say Live Disease Free and Lyme disease, you're going to find blog posts. You can do Live Disease Free and fungus, you'll find blog posts. So you can go deeper into these topics. But he found tapeworm larvae, and again, neurocysticercosis is like so many neurological symptoms that are just identical to MS and other chronic diseases. And he found them in every MS subject he looked at. He did find, I think it was 2 out of 10 MS subjects, he actually found developing juvenile tapeworms, like starting to grow in their brain, which is crazy. So he's literally the first researcher to find live parasites in the central nervous system of MS patients at their time of death. That is huge. He deserves a Nobel Prize for that. So since learning about his work, I've had the amazing privilege to study under different doctors and understand like how they are incorporating not just the herbs, but also parasite drugs. And our students have been incorporating that in very specific, safe plans that they're treating, effective plans. And if you want to see what our students are passing, go to Live Disease Free and Roundworms, and you'll find the blog post there, and you'll see a bunch of pictures of what our students are passing. Go look, do a search of Live Disease Free and flukes. A lot of our really, really sick students, I'm not a doctor at all, I'm just a coach. I just guide and direct them to the right information. And so a lot of them have flukes, as did I. And flukes are so pro-inflammatory. And yeah, we can have Candida inside of us. We can have Borrelia, which are these tiny, tiny little bacteria, but we can also have these horrible, huge worms. And like some of the ones I've passed are like 3 to 5 inches. Well, I would say maybe 3 to 4 inches long, but I've seen 5-inch flukes that students have passed, and they're flat and they're wider. So they're like maybe 2 to 4 inches usually on average, but they're about 1 centimeter wide, and they're flat. They're very characteristic. It's not like a little piece of food, and they're really pro-inflammatory. So we're getting better at treating all of these different types. But if you want to see what they look like, because it's really hard to find pictures of flukes, if you just do a Google search and you look, you get these like drawn pictures or cartoon type pictures, but why are they hiding this from us? Like, and then too, like we think, oh, well, you read the research, it's like, well, no, flukes, you'd have to get them in Asia, you'd have to get like water plants and things. But in British Columbia, Canada, in our freshwater lakes, we have swimmer's itch, which the geese will pass on to humans and to pets. And guess what swimmer's itch is caused by? It's caused by flukes, by schistosomiasis is what it causes, but it's blood flukes. And I was just like freaked out when I heard that, because my son, when he was really young, he was swimming in the lake, and we had pets swimming in the lake, dogs, and one dog got really bad swimmer's itch. And then my son had these big welts on his leg. And I thought it was bacterial until I've been like studying flukes more. So what happens is we can be exposed to flukes at some point in our life, and our immune system is supposed to get rid of all of them. But if they don't, if our immune system is not able to clear all of it, then some of them will grow and they will start to mature, and then they will start to lay eggs and they will hatch, and we have like some of these parasites can lay hundreds of thousands of eggs in a day, and the flukes can live for 20 to 30 years inside of us. Like, that's their lifespan. I'm not saying that you'll have a fluke infection for 20 to 30 years and that's gone. It's no, these worms can live for 20 to 30 years inside of us. It's so disgusting. That's been a really big eye-opener for me, is the flukes, because that is something that it's really hard to find a lot of information about them. And treating them is challenging. We have to use a combination of drugs. And so some people will have blood flukes, and they will really infect the bladder and cause a lot of bladder issues. And then we can have liver flukes that will, and some of them are giant liver flukes that will infect our liver and, you know, the liver gallbladder meridian, and then we end up getting our gallbladder removed. And then some are intestinal flukes that like to live in the intestines. So that is something that we have learned a lot. I have seen, like, I'm sure at least 1,000 pictures by now from our students. They're really good. Like, as they're passing these worms, they're laying them, they're dead, laying them on parchment paper, on tin foil. They're putting a ruler beside it so we can tell. And that's part of how they are figuring, and helping them to figure out their game plan. Because if they are passing flukes and they test well for fluke medication, and they have certain neurological symptoms, like all of that, it all helps to bring us to a more effective treatment plan. Because what breaks my heart is there are so many people that know they have parasites, and they're just grabbing at, like, oh, I'll just try. I heard that albendazole and fenbendazole and ivermectin are really good. They cure everything. They don't. And then they'll use them for a while. They won't use the right amount. They could make the parasites resistant to those drugs. And then they're like, oh, that didn't work. It doesn't work. These parasites are very happy inside of us. If you think about your digestive tract, the intestines are about the surface area of a double tennis court. You can fit hundreds, if not thousands of worms in there. And it's surprising that some of our students are like, Pam, I have counted that I've passed 200 worms and I'm still counting, still passing them. And it makes you think, like, how can we still be alive when we have that many in? And they do notice significant symptom improvement. So we don't really appreciate the burden that we have, that many of us have. We don't understand how populated these parasites in our body. But that is through the work that we're doing in the Live Disease-Free plan. We have learned that, and we continue to learn. So now we're kind of like, okay, so we know these parasite drugs will treat the adult form, but then we also want to take herbs that will treat the larva, the immature form. We want to do multiple cycles until we are completely symptom-free and we're not passing anything for a significant amount of time. And I have shared blog posts about all of those worms, but also about MS and Protozoa. So Protozoa, I talked about that last week. Protozoa are single-cell parasites that can cause a lot of damage in the body. So their structure is more complicated or more complex than bacteria, and so they can cause more problems inside of us. So there are probably multiple protozoa that we don't even know about yet, but definitely Plasmodium, which causes malaria. So the protozoa that causes malaria, that protozoa, it's been known again since the early 1900s, the late 1800s, when they were treating malaria in the United States. I don't know about Canada, but for sure in the United States. And they noticed that when they were giving them malaria medication, like to the MS patients, that it really helped their symptoms tremendously. So then some of these hero doctors back in the day that were able to do some research and were looking under the microscope, they discovered these malaria protozoa inside of MS patients. So they're really hard to find. You have to stain things properly, you have to look in the right place for it, but they found these in the central nervous system of multiple sclerosis patients. And also later, there's a connection between Babesia and multiple sclerosis. So the Plasmodium and Babesia, they're very similar protozoa. They infect our red blood cells, and they cause our red blood cells to be defective, and then they are sticky and they clump together. And so this can cause a lot of inflammation in our blood vessels. Remember, there's CCSVI because our MS is known to decrease circulation, where we have narrowing of veins. This could easily explain that. And then also with multiple sclerosis, there are brain bleeds. I've shared another blog post about how with multiple sclerosis, they believe it's a vascular disorder, not an autoimmune disorder, because of all these abnormalities and deficiencies in circulation. And also with every lesion, it's centered around a blood vessel. There's a blood vessel running through each lesion. And what they found back a long time ago, like early 1900s, they found this little ring of iron around the outside edge of lesion. That would make sense, because if you have like a ruptured blood vessel because your red blood cells are clumping together and it's plugging up a capillary, very, very small blood vessels, then all of a sudden that capillary breaks, then you have a brain bleed, then you have red blood cells and all kinds of things that are in the blood that should not go into the central nervous system are going in there. And do you think the immune system is going to get involved? Absolutely. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, we've got a big damage here. We've got all this material that is going to hurt our brains. We need to get it out. So that ring of iron deposit around the outside of the lesion would make sense if you have a lot of red blood cells, because they carry hemoglobin, they carry iron, and it all makes sense. So this connection, again, there are many, I think there's like 75 studies linking multiple sclerosis to a protozoa that is similar to the one that causes malaria or babesiosis. So I lump them together because they're both protozoa that infect our red blood cells. They're treated very similarly. They cause very similar types of symptoms. And it is something that's really common in multiple sclerosis and in other chronic diseases. So like the Babesia can cause a lot of air hunger, where you walk up the stairs or walking up a hill, you just like, this is ridiculous. I should be able to breathe, but you just can't catch your breath. Night sweats, day sweats, like all of that. There's tons of symptoms. You can look up the blog post of multiple sclerosis and Babesia, or just do live disease free and Babesia, and you'll find that article. I have done a ton of research for you. All right. And because I want you guys to see that there is a better way for you, that there is a way that you can treat the cause and you can get your health and your life back and you can start to live. I love my life. I'm so grateful. I have a lot of grandkids. I have animals. I'm outside a lot. I work a lot. I have so many things to be grateful for, and I want other people to have that same opportunity, especially when you know the truth and it's so frustrating that it's hidden from us. MS is considered to be a vascular disorder. Look at that blog post that I have. That is huge. So I don't know if every single person that has MS has Borrelia and Babesia and like all of these different parasites. But what I always like to say is that think about like these different chronic diseases like ALS, MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, like all of these different diseases. That is like a lawn, like your front yard, your lawn. If you have thick grass, healthy, you fertilize it, you water it, it's really hard for the weeds to take hold. But if you don't water it often and some of the grass dies back, then what happens is you get these patches and the weeds move in, and you will get many different types of weeds that will move in. And that's exactly what happens inside of us. We should have this ecosystem, this rainforest of health promoting microbes, thick layer of them, diversity, and that protects us from parasites. Not all, it doesn't protect us from all, but it really decreases the risk of us having a parasitic infestation. But then some of us, like myself, are on antibiotics a few times or many times. I was on antibiotics many times when I was young, but also as a teenager for acne. And I used tetracycline, which is a broad spectrum antibiotic, which really devastated my ecosystem. I lived on a farm. I was exposed to all the parasites that, are farm animals, and I was in the dirt, and I was playing, and I was having a good old time. And so as a young child, I had stomach aches, and I would be, if our family would eat like a hamburger, I'd be just laying on the floor with a stomach ache, or if I had some sugar, I was terribly constipated. So way back then, I was out of balance. It's called dysbiosis. And so I'm just scratching the surface. I've done a lot of other different types of blog posts. Go to livediseasefree.com, go under our blog post. You'll see, just look at the topics, go back and back. So, they gave one really well done 4-year study. They gave MS patients levomizole and a control that didn't. And they noticed that people on the levomizole, where they had that parasite drug, they had less MS flares than the MS patients that didn't get the parasite drug. I also wanted to mention that when we're talking about the whole malaria connection to multiple sclerosis, that there was a study done by the University of Calgary, and I talked about that also. I did a blog post on it. That was not even 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. But they found that giving patients that have progressive multiple sclerosis, by giving them this drug that treats malaria, that they had a significant reduction in the progression of MS. So again, this was probably a fairly short study, but for them to show that with somebody who's like dealing with significant, progression and disability and no breaks and no treatments, and to find that was like, why is this not being studied? Like, why are we not carrying on with this study? Proving or disproving? I hope you guys are starting to see that something is really wrong. Something is really, really wrong. And if we just keep buying it, if we just keep following it, we lose our quality of life. We have a shortened life. We die prematurely. And the truth is right under our nose. Another thing that I shared, another blog post, is that parasites cause lesions in the brain. I've shared studies where they talk about all kinds of different parasites. They know in science that when parasites get in the brain, that's what they cause is lesions. Why are they not studying like what kind of parasites could possibly be causing the lesions that we have in the brain? I also talked about high lactate or high lactic acid in multiple sclerosis. That's another really, really significant find in the spinal fluid of MS, and that's really linked to increased progression of disease. And we know that there are many different types of parasites that can cause lactic acid. So this is Candida, malaria, Lyme disease, and these are all things we're talking about today. High lactic acid in your body, in your central nervous system, causes us to be more acidic, and that can throw off the biochemistry in our body. So we can because what'll happen is we have a lot of acid. Many of us know we're acidic when we're sick, and because that's something that we've kind of studied, but then our body tries to keep us alive, so it's going to use up a lot of minerals and electrolytes to buffer the acid to keep us a little bit more alkaline so we can stay alive. So we become deficient in electrolytes and minerals, and then it could be muscle spasms because we're deficient in certain minerals or electrolytes. So it's not necessarily always that the parasites are directly causing damage to our tissue and our nerves, but sometimes it's the changes that they cause inside of us, the toxins they produce, the imbalances they cause, that cause a lot of the symptoms that we have. Just recently, I talked about glutamate. So years ago, I studied how in ALS, there is dysregulated glutamate, which is a neurotransmitter. And that neurotransmitter, it excites our nerves. But I didn't realize that it's also present in multiple sclerosis. And there are many studies that are linking high glutamate in MS, and this is like getting on 20 years. Nobody's looking at why there's high glutamate. Like, why don't they care? It's so awful. And so again, this disruption in glutamate, if you think about your nerves being excited, like overly excited, it's going to burn them out. It's going to fry them. And this is found in the lesions of MS. It's also linked with increased progression of disease. So I hope that you're seeing that I'm sharing with you a mountain of evidence. Like, it's so profound that if you continue on the path that you're on with just following the advice of our standard of care, I don't know what to say, because like all of this is science-based. It has nothing to do with me. Let's talk about the plan to recover, because that's what we all want to do. These parasites cause a lot of inflammation in our body. That is the war. Our immune system is fighting infections, and sometimes the war gets out of hand where the good guys can no longer defend us and they need help. We do not want to suppress them. We do not want to destroy our T cells and our B cells. In my masterclass training, I go into a lot more detail, but it's like basically 4 simple steps. Number 1, we follow a diet where we are decreasing the food to the parasites that are making us sick. They love carbohydrates and simple sugar. So as you decrease their food, they don't have as much energy, they're more quiet, and we see inflammation go down significantly. So down to 30 to 40 total grams of carbs per day. If you have not learned about the Live Disease-Free diet, you can find that on our website, livediseasefree.com. Go under research. You will see there a link. You'll see the guidelines. You'll see some meal ideas. You'll find a cheat sheet. Start to implement it. I can't remember, it was last week or the week before, somebody from the general public was commenting and they shared like, I'm starting to follow your diet and I can start walking better. Like, that is what we see. That is more than any MS drug will ever do for you, is just following this diet. That's number 1. Number 2, we want to support our body. So we look at our blood work and we look to see like, is there certain things in our blood work that are off, and we need to support that. We need to have daily bowel movements. We need to be sleeping well. So we encourage like really health promoting things that will help to make us feel better before we treat. So we should be feeling significantly better before we treat. The first things we notice is like bladder function improves significantly. Instead of getting up multiple times through the night, a person might get up once or twice, and then they're sleeping better, and then they feel better the next day. We notice brain fog can improve. We notice that the spasms start to go down. Pain can decrease significantly if the carbs are low enough. If they're not low enough, you won't notice any difference because the parasites are fat and happy. And they do not need 3 meals a day. So if you have a little bit too much for breakfast or lunch, they're happy. It's like putting gas on a fire. So we notice all kinds of symptom improvements. Balance, it could be cognitive function, more mental clarity, mood improving because we're sleeping better. Usually we're sleep deprived because of these parasites. So that's the prep phase, is the diet and supporting the body. Then we go to treating. And with treating, this is where we use a combination of parasite drugs and herbs, antimicrobial herbs, and an oxygen type therapy that I'm not allowed to talk about on any platform. It has been heavily censored. Things are changing. There are a lot of practitioners that are starting to talk about it now. I should say more researchers that are very forward thinking. There's a lot of studies, research behind it. It's totally safe. And so we use this. It's very cost effective. You can actually find videos on Rumble where I talk about oxygen for treating parasites. You can find out more about it there. I can't talk about it on this platform, but it's so incredibly helpful. That's how we see all these pictures of the worms. We can use oxygen in enemas, and that helps to kill the larger parasites and small ones, but we don't see the small ones, but we see the large ones. In the large intestine, they come out. And then later, when we're ready to treat, we can use it orally, and that helps to treat parasites in our blood. It's profound. Everyone should know how to use these oxygen type therapy. And so we're using herbs, the oxygen therapy, and different types of parasite drugs. Again, it's really an individual plan based on the types of parasites you have. And again, the parasite drugs are not a magic cure. It really takes strategy. It takes what kind of parasites are you passing? What symptoms do you have? What's your diagnosis? What do you energy test well for? All of that together to make 6 different criteria to help us to build a game plan. And we do cycles. We always treat from big to small. Remember those nematodes that were full of Borrelia? If you just treat Borrelia, if you just treat Lyme disease, but you don't get rid of the parasites that are carrying them, you'll be treating Borrelia forever. So treat big to small over multiple cycles. And of course, all the other things are really important, like lifestyle, balancing our life, nurturing our soul, being active, making sure we're doing heavy metal detoxes. Liver, gallbladder flushes can be really helpful because a lot of parasites will hide there. So all of those other things are important, and we cover them too. But the biggest, I would say, the unique part of this program is that it teaches you how to play an active role in recovering from a parasitic infestation that causes MS and all chronic diseases. So what do people notice? This is where people feel happy again. They feel relaxed. A lot of these parasites cause severe anxiety. And we had our call last night, or the students that are in the program, and they're one student was sharing, I just feel so relaxed. I have had such terrible anxiety for so long, and it just feels so good to be relaxed. We also notice, again, the stiffness and spasticity subside, balance returns. One of our students right now in the program, she's starting to walk again. I don't know if she's walking at least a mile or longer, several times a week. She doesn't need that apparatus when you have drop foot to kind of pull your ankle up. She doesn't need that anymore. She's starting, and I don't think she's even treating it or just barely treating, but just with the prep phase. Maybe she is barely treating, but she is already starting to walk without needing that apparatus to lift up her ankle. She doesn't have drop foot. Tremors diminish, pain ends. People can write again. Their speech improves, vision improves, hair, nails, complexion. People are come up to them oh, you look so much better. You look so much younger. What are you doing? And it's like these parasites make you age, they make you tired, they make you feel absolutely horrible inside and out. So when you start treating them and you flood your body with lots of nutrition, then you start to notice like, wow, like I feel like literally 20 years younger. And isn't that fun to have that? Because for me, I'm in my 60s, so I would like to have quality of life as long as I can. Obviously, I'm not going to live forever. I do believe in heaven. I do believe in God. And I look forward to that. But while I'm here, I would like to feel good. Once we recover, then it's all about maintaining our new amazing life. So this is where we have to treat periodically, because just like we do with our dogs, our cats, our horses, any animal you have, you treat them periodically. It might be once a year, it might be twice a year. That is why we have such a huge sickness industry, is because we're not treating the parasites that are causing the sickness. And I'll just quickly share that we have amazing wellness champions. You can hear their stories. Again, many of them have gone on to writing books, starting health food companies, starting podcasts, starting wellness clinics in different parts of the world. So honored to support them. Some of them are just enjoying life. Like one of them is a retired dentist, and she's just traveling and she's taking care or enjoying her family and babysitting grandchildren that she's never been able to babysit, just no longer needs a walker. She's just living, exercising. So whatever your goal is, that's the only way we can get there to recover, is by treating the cause. So you can watch their videos on YouTube, Live Disease Free, on our website, Live Disease Free. Grab some Kleenex, because it'll make you cry when you hear the happy stories of how life-changing this has been for them. So there is this expert panel that decides how MS is diagnosed and treated around the world. And all of the different health authorities in different countries have to follow what they are recommending. And so they are recommending MRIs, looking for lesions in specific places that come and go. And they're also possibly looking at lumbar puncture or spinal tap for antibody bands. It's kind of like a secondary, to get a second opinion, like if they're not sure. Over the years, those lesions, they're like, well, no, it can only be here, here, and here. And then, well, no, now you can have lesions in different parts. Oh, well, now we'll update it and you can have lesions. So that's been changing. That's a target. And again, what's causing the lesions? Why aren't we looking for a cure? Why are we not doing autopsies and looking for parasites? Those are really important questions. And when you look at the back of the McDonald criteria, it's a PDF you can find online. I've shared this, and just look at who is funding these different experts. It is all the companies that are selling the MS drugs. So the companies that have the product that they want to market to MS, they are influencing the people that are deciding how MS is going to be treated. So they're like, yes, we have to look for only these two things, and we have to suppress the immune system, because the immune system is destroying our nerve tissue for no reason. And that is a bunch of baloney, and that has to change. And this is where you guys can help me to get the word out, because I have shared a ton of evidence that MS is caused by a parasitic infestation, different types of parasites, probably in different patients that have multiple sclerosis. It's not, and that's why it's hard to find a cookie cutter approach for everybody, but it's not that hard. We have people that are recovering, people that have recovered, and they've maintained their recovery for at least 8 to 9 years by now. So that's proof in the pudding right there. So if you really appreciate what I've shared, the hours and hours of studying that I've done, please share this widely with practitioners, all kinds of people, groups, people that are, anyone that's willing to listen and hear. And if you are dealing with a parasitic infestation, or maybe you're just like, wow, that sounds really interesting, possibly, but I don't know, I need to do a little more digging, go to livediseasefree.com and start to look at these blog posts. when you're ready to treat, if you need support, make sure to reach out to me. We've got a plan that's proven that can help. It doesn't matter what country you live in the world, it will help you to learn all of this. And this is a skill that you must have so that you can play that active role in your healthcare. You can make sure you get the right treatments, the effective doses, to make sure that you are using the right drugs and recovering. And then once you have that skill, you can make sure you never end up in this position again in the future. So with that, watch my masterclass training, which I share all of the steps in greater detail. And if you want to book a time with me because you're interested, you want to make sure it's a good fit for you, the Live Disease-Free plan, you will be able to do that if you fill out the form. And then watch the Coach-a-thon, because that goes into even more detail about how we're going to work together. So you can have a lot of your questions answered even before you chat with me. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.